Hello, it's been a while, and welcome to the West London Sport QPR podcast with myself, David McIntyre, joined by West London Sport's James Paterson, and of course, former QPR striker Kevin Gallen. A lot's occurred, good and not so good, since our last podcast, which we didn't get a chance to cover, but there's plenty to get through with this one. We'll be reflecting on the West Ham game, of course. We're going to talk about a few QPR players, two of whom myself and Kevin haven't been hugely complimentary about in the past. That's Rayan Kolli and Jonathan Varane. We're going to talk about the injury situation, the state of that pitch at Loftus Road, and of course, with it being January, the obvious things to discuss at this time of year. Ronnie Edwards, the possible comings and goings still to come, and what Rangers perhaps still need. We'll start with the West Ham game, though. Kev, you were there. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, as we were just talking about before, I was at the top, so couldn't really see much. I didn't have my binoculars and stuff because I think it's been well documented. I have been to West Ham before, but I've never been in the away end. But yeah, I mean, what a shambles of a stadium that is for a football ground. Really, really bad. The West Ham fans would be sold a pup there big time. But moving on, I thought we played quite well. Yeah, I thought it was a good performance. Thought we defended really well, contained them, look organised. They found it hard to break us down. In the end, they two bits of sort of magic really from Somerville was sort of the game. He was the game changer, especially the second goal. What he did on the left-hand side to Jimmy Dunn was a fabulous turn. He got a little bit too tight. He tried to, try and nick it in front, and he turned it superbly and put in such a lovely cross. But no, I thought we came out of it looking quite well. Didn't want to go there and sort of, and get embarrassed, and we didn't by any stretch of the imagination. So I thought it was, a solid performance. But obviously, it's another third round exit. The fans were magnificent again. A great day out, to go to a ground that QPR haven't played at, ever before. So really good day out. Just pity we just didn't get that result. And just, I was in the crowd there just hoping for penalties, to be honest. And that would, penalties would have been a great sort of achievement, but a great way to end the game. And anything can happen in penalties. But it wasn't to be, but I think it was a solid performance.
I didn't actually go, but James, like Kevin, you did, and you spoke to Julian Stefan afterwards. He praised the players and the fans, and rightly so. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, I think he was quite upbeat. I think it was such an impressive effort from the team, despite having so many injuries from the week before. We were missing maybe 3 or 4 key players that would have been so important for rotation in that game. So he was really upbeat. I felt like he felt a lot of pride based off how his team had worked so hard into extra time as well, and it did seem like they gave everything. He was really impressed by by how Walsh performed. I asked him about that at the end of the press conference, that there were a number of really impressive saves from him, which really stood out. And there's been a lot of criticism or conversation around the goalkeepers moving and changing so much this season, but I think relatively upbeat. So yeah, Stefan seemed to be in a good mood.
I mean, I kind of had mixed feelings about it, guys, to be honest. I think I'll give the kind of miserable sod version first, which was, I think, looking at the fuss made of an equaliser in a defeat. And also, let's face it, I think that reaction is largely down to because there's a history of no-shows and stinking the place out in games like that. And a celebration of actually turning up and not disgracing yourself seems kind of reflective of some of the issues at QPR. But then again, that moment to celebrate a goal in front of a big QPR following, when does that happen? I mean, it just doesn't happen. Going back many years to when you were a player, Kevin, and before and since. I mean, in a game like that, you could take QPR nil as almost guaranteed. And other away fans seem to get those moments. We see them have them a couple of times a month at Loftus Road sometimes, frankly. So yeah, I'm with those who say they just wanted a moment like that, and it was a great moment, wasn't it? I mean, Richard Kone in front of the QPR following like that, and that was nice, and the fans they deserve that. I thought it was a tough one for Rangers really, because all season, including when it was clear the kids were going to play at Plymouth, like in the Carabao Cup, but I really expected Rangers to have a crack at the FA Cup this year, and after a draw, I thought they beat West Ham. I really did, but I think the injuries really did kill them, the injuries in the build up to that game. I mean, we'll talk about those in a second, but I'm probably in a minority in that I would have been playing Richard Coney this season, as well as Barella's done, and I'll maybe explain a little bit more about that. But as well as Barella's done, and he's been fantastic, I would still be playing Coney as the lone striker. And I realised that the guy getting 10 goals makes a bit of a mockery of that, but that's kind of how I saw it. But in that particular game, I thought if there was one player Rangers wouldn't want to lose in that game, it was Romain Barrel. He would have been absolutely perfect for that. And that was a big miss for him, and other players being out as well. So we'll never know, but on a different day, as good account of themselves as the Rangers gave, I think on a different day, in different circumstances, with a bit more luck in the build up to that game, I think Rangers might have won it, to be honest. I really do. So that's a disappointment. We'll talk a bit more about those injuries, and another one obviously was sustained in Saito going off. But before that, I did want to mention Rayan Kolli, as I said at the start. He's received some praise for his performance, and of course before that he scored the 2 goals after coming on against Sheffield Wednesday. As an interesting player, Kev, what are your thoughts on him at the moment?
Well, I thought he played well on Sunday. That was the best I've saw him play without scoring, as in sort of link-up play. When I've watched him before, and even the game, I didn't go to the game against Sheffield Wednesday, but there was times when he played against Sheffield Wednesday that he gave the ball away so cheaply. And we can all say the pitch and this, but and there's been times before when I've seen him play it from when he's give the ball away cheaply. But against Sheffield Wednesday, he scores 2 goals, so it can mask sort of what happened before during the game. And obviously, he's grown his confidence is then high. He's gone into the game on Sunday, and he's put in a really good performance against a Premiership team who I know we all know are struggling. But I thought he had a really good game, and you know he's this Saturday he's got a start. Really, this is his chance to stake a claim and play regular. He had a good spell. He had a spell in the team at the end of last season, and he didn't really do it. Now this is his chance. He's a year older, a year more experience. Hasn't played that much, but more experience and maybe stronger through training. So this is his time to come on and shine and show everyone if he's a good player that everyone keeps talking about. Just going back to what you said about Barrel missing on Sunday, I completely agree, because the space on the counter-attack for him to run into, and that's his great... his most impressive part of his game is his running in behind, and he would have been a real threat for us on Sunday. But regarding Rayan Kolli, he's got a really good opportunity. Barrel's injured; he ain't going to be back till what do they say, March, April. What has he done? Pulled his hamstring?
Yeah, it's a hamstring. It is a hamstring injury.
Yeah, because they said it was something. But when I saw it, I saw him clutching the back of his leg, and that was like straight away. As I'm an expert on pulling my hamstring, I went, he's done his hamstring. So. This is a great opportunity for him because Kone, the manager likes to play 4-4-2. He likes to play 2 strikers, one a little bit deeper, but really 2 strikers. So this is an opportunity for him to get some games. Michael Frey seems to be out of the picture now and looking to be moved on. So this is his chance to get some goals and get some regular games under his belt.
James, I think you've been more forgiving of Kolli in the past, so you've currently got more credibility on this subject than maybe I have. So what were your thoughts on the lad?
I think I feel like he hasn't had much opportunity to really learn his trade. He's only got 31 senior appearances in total, and probably most of those are coming off the bench in games. So I personally feel like he's someone that would have benefited from playing in the lower leagues and being able to get a lot more game time and playing against men more often. Like you can kind of see that in his game. Like you were just saying then, Kevin, he kind of gives the ball away cheaply. He did sometimes in Sheffield Wednesday, but you can still see, and you'll be able to comment a lot more on this, but you can see he's got the raw ability and the finishing ability and the composure when it really matters. But in comparison, I was just looking at some numbers and making a play in comparison earlier when I had a bit of free time at work. But Harry Kane, that is, when he was the same age, he'd already played at 4 clubs. He played double the amount of games in 3 different leagues. And he hadn't set the world alight at the age of 20. Whereas Kolli, for example, has had half the amount of games, is not able to, hasn't been able to make as much of an impact. So now is his time. Now is his time to really prove himself and learn how to play against men. And we can see how far he can go in the next coming months.
Well, I agree with the main thing. I agree with you there, James. Is I think last season and maybe definitely last season he should have been out on loan at a League One or League Two club, playing against men, playing in front of fans, and learning his trade. It hasn't happened, and that's maybe have stunted him, and maybe he's just stunted his sort of experience, and maybe a year or so. So we'll see. He's got an opportunity now, and the proof will be in the pudding in the next couple of months.
I mean, I have been a bit dismissive of Kolli in the past. I mean, there's a few reasons for it. I think when you get a young player, there is an awful lot of goodwill, quite rightly, towards him among fans, and you do often get this insistence that the latest young player coming through should be getting a chance, and he's this and he's that. That's even more so if they're an attacking player, which obviously he is. The last thing I want to do is kind of be unkind about a player based on his appearance, but I do feel like the flamboyant hairstyle and the fact that he's got Algerian heritage, which means he's got some coverage there and has played a level of international football, I do think that's led to a kind of coverage and a profile that's disproportionate to his level. I know that his admirers won't agree with that, but that's how I've always, seen him. But fair's fair. James, you kind of alluded to this. I haven't been his biggest fan, and I'm not a great fan of the reliance in the modern game on data, but his stats do speak for themselves. I mean, with the opportunities he's got, his goals and his goal involvements, they speak for themselves, and you can't deny that, and you can't take anything away from him there. Yes, other aspects of his game have disappointed, but he's only 20. That will come. That's inevitable that he's going to fall short in other ways. He's done. Let's face it, Kevin. Even though I in particular have criticised him in the past, and you've not been his biggest believer, there are players that have got a run in the QPR side or got fat contracts on the basis of far less than Rayan Kolli's already done at the age of 20, and I do think that needs to be acknowledged. And I don't want to step away too much from what I've said about him previously, because I think that'd be a bit disingenuous of me. But I would say that I was then talking about him when he was seen as a wide player or a number 10. It was often mentioned as some kind of generational talent in the Eze mould, and not for me. That's never been the case. But I think as a striker, he's been a bit of a find, and he's kind of he's shown qualities there that I wasn't really looking for in him, to be honest. He's delivered. He can strikes the ball really well. His link-up play is improving. He's actually decent in the air. So in that role, he's a good option. And even though I've not been his biggest fan, there have been times over the last year or so where I would have been playing him, or I would have had him, particularly pre-Kone and Burrell. I would have had him, if not playing, then closer to the team. And I definitely can see why some were frustrated that until recently Frey was getting more game time than him. So well done to him and good luck to him. It's really good to see him do well. I hope he sustains it. He'll need to, because I still think there's a willingness down there to give Daniel Benny a chance up front, because that's seen as his natural position. But I hope he carries on, keeps it up, knuckles down, avoids the silly injuries, and hopefully gets a good run. Talking of injuries, they're still kind of occurring. There's another one picked up, and this was obviously after Burrell, Ilias Chair again. Clark Salter, as we know, has had various issues. Kwame Poku's first season, I think we can now say, has really not gone very well in light of the injuries that he has had. Kevin, what are your thoughts on that? Because it's an ongoing issue.
Well, a lot of people are talking about the pitch, but we've only played on that pitch twice when it's been bad. Is that right? The Norwich game and the Sheffield Wednesday. So I'm not too sure. It doesn't. By the way, it doesn't help. But I think it's just the volume of games over Christmas. I think a lot of teams and players have picked up injuries. When you do your hamstring, which I've done many a times over my career when I played, and once you do it once, there's always that little thing where it's very susceptible to happen again, and that's happened with Poku. Am I right? Has he done the same hamstring that he done at the start, and Ilias Chair? It's honestly, it's one of those. It's such an injury that you just you think you're fine and you're running, and then it's just all of a sudden bang, and you just like you pull up, and if you don't get it 100, I would even I know it's silly, but 110% right. If you're 100, I've might have said this loads of times, David. If you're ready for Saturday, you think you're ready, and you've trained a week, I'd go another week. I really would, just to that extra week of rehabbing. But there's obviously a problem. I don't know what to pick up. Is it is it Sato hamstring, Burrell, Chair, Poku hamstrings? Yeah, well, that doesn't look good, and people will talk about training pitches and this, that, and the other. I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on, but look, it's unfortunate for those players because a hamstring, it's a minimum month, 6 weeks, and if you get a bad one, it could be 2-3 months. So, they need to get back fit. But Poku's career at QPR has been hampered by injuries, and he'll probably be thinking, I just need to get back as soon as possible, but really concentrate on next season. I don't know how bad his hamstring is. I haven't been told, but if he's pulled the same one, it's not good. When you start redoing the same hamstring again, you got to look at your rehab, the medical and stuff, and everyone has to have a look in the mirror.
It isn't the same. Sorry, James, just quickly. It isn't the same hamstring, Kev, as it was earlier in the season. But the one he's injured now, he had injured previously at Peterborough, so there is a recurrent problem there, and also he has had problems in both hamstrings, which is arguably worse. You could say
that goes back to sort of stiffness in your back. I'm just going on what I'm talking about on my previous is stiffness in your back. Your glute muscles, just your flexibility in your glutes and your hamstrings. It's all sort of all linked. Power and that is bad. If he's done his other hamstring, well, I wish him all the best in his recovery.
Was that always in the back of your head, Kevin, when you were in the months after recovery or like weeks after you pulled out your hamstring? Was your game affected because of the psychology that went into it?
Yeah, I think it did because it will be right in the back of your head, and you're thinking, this one I can't really sprint. So in training, it's okay because you can hold back in training, but when you're playing in front of a crowd and the ball just drops there, like 5 yards away, and you don't think about it, and you just go, and that's when if your hamstring ain't 100%, that's when it will go when you're not thinking about it. So that's why I say about have an extra week. Or maybe 10 days when you think you're okay and you think you can, when you're doing your sprints in training, just that extra like rehabbing and powering your hamstring and weights and, flexibility, just give it that extra 10 days, 14 days, because if you do it again, you're out for 6 weeks. And I've been down that road and it's a horrible feeling.
James, it just kind of takes away some of those attacking options that Rangers seem to be getting back at an important part of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're getting quite short up there. When it was only a couple of weeks ago, we felt like we had really impressive depth all across the attack. But yeah, it means that looking forward to January, they're going to have to be. I wasn't thinking of talking about this a couple of weeks ago, but they probably will be needing to consider who are going to be our main attacking options going forward.
I mean, talking of January, let's get on to that then. We'll start with Ronnie Edwards, which obviously is the big incoming transfer and one that lots of people would have wanted. Kevin, what do you think about that? Good deal?
Just quick question. Why didn't he play on Sunday? I actually thought he was going to play. I was expecting. Is he injured?
He wasn't registered in time, apparently, Stefan was saying.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's a good long-term signing. Do I think we need a centre half? Yeah, probably, because Cook will be going in the end. Will be going in the end of the season. Morrison doesn't seem to be in the manager's plans because Cook's playing ahead of him. Jimmy Dunn is cemented now as the right side centre half. So Ronnie Edwards and Jake Clark sort of can't seem to get fit and maybe just can't rely on him for obvious reasons. So you needed a centre half. I think he's a good player. He's young. He'll get better. The only thing with him, I'm not sure he can defend the box great. like as in a header, like Jimmy Dunn can, but he's mobile and he's good on the ball. So it's a good signing in the long run because for next season as well.
Sorry, Kev. James?
I guess he's also incredibly handsome, so that also helps as well. But I think also when he first played for us, he kind of stepped into the 6 or 8 role. I remember in his first game last January, he was able to help out in the centre of midfield because there's some uncertainty around Varane. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, David. But I think being able to have a centre back that can play in that position could also be really useful. His introductory video on the social media was just like fantastic. It was so nice to see someone that was really keen and passionate about playing for QPR because of the family connection and because he'd had such good experience with us last year. So I think for me, that's a huge thing. And yeah, it's getting the fan base on side. Like the approval ratings amongst QPR fans is massive for him. So they're going to be really excited to have him back. And like you say, we can't rely on the likes of Jake Cluxall, Morrison. There's talk of there being interest elsewhere as well. So I think it's the right time to have him for now, but also for the future. And maybe he's a saleable asset that could give us profit in the next couple of years. Well,
that's the key thing. I mean, I think, to be honest, I think there are pros and cons to it. We'll start with the cons. Again, go into miserable sodden mode first. There's always a kind of must-have signing that QPR get excited about. That people convince themselves it's going to be out of reach, and he's signed, and there's a massive reaction. And if you look through the list of those, they're very often players or have been players that come back to QPR. Charlie Austin, Lee Cook, Jamie Mackie. There have been others. If you look at the history of those players and what happens after the signing that everyone wanted, Edwards will have to buck a trend there. Let's put it that way. The last one was Kone, who I would defend and I still think could do well for QPR. But I often joke that the must-have signing ends up being on the bench within 6 weeks, and Kone kind of hasn't been a regular recently. So I think there's a caution there. It's an area, as Kevin said, that there's not an urgent need for options. Also, most importantly, he's not been playing well for Southampton. His season's not been going well there. And I know that, there are a lot of people who will say, well, that's because he wants to play for QPR. That's where his heart is. And that kind of adds to, his popularity among fans. But again, I think caution there. He's not a Kevin or Mark Bircham, frankly. And I think there's often a yearning among people for there to be another Kevin or Mark Bircham. And they're very unique in terms of a genuine tie to a football club. And if a player's performance drops off because his head or his heart is elsewhere, I would say don't think for a moment that won't happen at your club, because it might very well do. So I'd be cautious about that. But, having said that, sometimes a player and a club, there is just a fit. It works. They're meant for each other. And there is some evidence that that's the case here, because he did do well at Rangers last season. There's no doubt about that. He isn't an unknown. This isn't the case of going and spending money on an unknown player. They know him. They know the level that he can play at. He's an excellent age in terms of development potential. So he's proven at QPR. It is a lot of money, which means, to be honest, with the other must-have signings, I've often been quite critical of them from the start. This one, I'd be 50-50 on. I don't envy somebody making this decision. I think this is a really, really difficult call for a number of reasons, whether to go and spend that money on Ronnie Edwards. I think that is a difficult decision. But I can see why they've done it, because in the end, even though they don't need a centre-back, arguably, when the opportunity comes up to invest in a player, and this is, fans want people to want owners to speculate to accumulate. This is a very much a speculate to accumulate signing. It's the absolute epitome of one. They've paid a lot of money in the hope and belief that they'll get much more back. So it's a big call. At some point, when you're trying to do that and improve yourself so that you're more than a mid-table championship club or a bit lower, you do have to take the plunge, don't you, at some point. And if the money's there and the opportunity is there to bring in someone who you think can develop into a £10 million plus player, then I suppose you do have to say, if not now, then when, if it's a player that like Ronnie Edwards. So I think a tougher decision. I think it's a much tougher decision than maybe some of his admirers think. But I can see why they've done it. And like you said, another thing as well about him, James, is he does give you an option in midfield, which is another thing to consider. James,
Dave, just a quick question.
Sorry, go. Yeah.
Where have we? I know the owners have got money, and fair play to them. They're putting their money where their mouth is all the time. But what's happening with FFP? Are we at the start of a 3-year cycle, or it seems like we're flush at the moment? I know we got the Eze money, but surely they didn't get all that up front, and it was all that will be all in stages. Is that right? Like,
yeah, well,
Arsenal will be playing Palace in stages, so all in one hit.
I think at the moment they're still on the right side of FFP, and I think they would argue that in terms of net spend, they're actually, they're quite close to a middle ground. What I would say, Kev, is, and again we'll talk about Varane probably in a second, they definitely need to sell someone this summer. That is a must. They've got to sell someone. So
because what I'm saying is Sato in the summer, how much was he?
Sato in the summer was, my memory's failing me now. I think it was 3.5 million. I think it was 3.5 million.
Okay, and wasn't Dembele in the summer 3 million because he was signed loan, or was that?
No, it wasn't. It was less than 3 million. I can't remember the exact fee for him, but that was less than 3 million. But like you said, the basic point, Kev, they are spending. I mean, look, I would argue that QPR have spent for 30 plus years, Kev. I think there was a little spell under Gary Waddock many years ago when you were a player, and there was a little spell under Ferdinand and Ramsey where money was tight. And apart from that, I'd argue that there's been 30 plus years of talking about not spending much when actually they've spent plenty.
I know. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying about the FFP rules, because the last 2 seasons, we can't do this FFP, we can't do that FFP.
Yeah, that's as you're coming again. Yeah, so you come to the end of that cycle, which is what they did, and it's a tough message to sell to fans, isn't it? That we're coming to an end of an FFP cycle, so it's going to be tight and things are going to be a bit grim, and then a little bit like they did, if you remember, towards the end of Mark Warburton's time, or during, I should say, Mark Warburton's time at QPR, where they then invested a bit. They tried to have a crack at the playoffs, and they weren't very happy with how he was performing there. And then now they've kind of had a bit of a restart. But like I said, there is also a speculate to accumulate mentality. That there's a difference, a fundamental difference, isn't there, between spending on the players that got QPR promoted in 2011, and then a couple of years later when they went back, and spending on the likes of Austin and Johansson and others that came in a few years ago in the hope of squeezing into the Premier League. This is slightly different because they are spending money to improve the squad, yes, and to challenge, yes, but they're still spending money on players that they think they will be able to get their money back, because an Eze, who you take on a free and sell for a lot of money, doesn't come along every day. I think there's a recognition that in order to make money, they're going to have to perhaps invest and spend what are decent amounts of money. And £4.5 million for QPR, or I would argue any kind of medium-sized club, is a lot of money. And I have to say, I would have been 50-50 over Edwards, and it possibly, we've talked about this before, possibly would have fit into the Cocky Saito category, Kev, of I like him and I can see why people like him, but it would probably be a no for me. But I'm not sure. I would have agonised over that one. I think it's a tough one. I can see why they've done it. I can see why they've taken the plunge there.
I think James made a good point that he can actually go in midfield and play as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, talking of midfield, Jonathan Varane, who I said we mentioned, both of us, Kev, have not really been firm believers in him, despite some of the attributes that he does have. There is some interest. St Etienne in France, one of the clubs that have been in for him, they've come back in again. Rangers have turned them down, mainly on the basis that the obligation to buy, I think, was a little bit sketchy, and I don't think there's any interest from QPR getting rid of a player like Varane now rather than the summer, unless it definitely means a permanent transfer.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah, and I think St Etienne are they third, James, in the second tier in France?
Yes.
Are they third?
Yeah. Or fourth, I think.
Fourth. And I think they'd be unlikely to pay up for him, a player like that, if they don't go up. So from QPR's point of view, that loan with a view to buy doesn't really make too much sense. There's interest from other clubs. AEK Athens is another one, but whether they come up with a package for him, I think it would make it worth his while. I'm not sure, but he's definitely a player who I think has been earmarked and has been for quite a while as one that can be sold for a bit of a profit. Kev, I'm inclined to think, based on stuff you've said about him before, that your feeling is going to be on this: sell him if you possibly can. Am I right?
Yes, based on performances this season, I think he's had a poor season. I don't think anyone can argue with that. My biggest thing with him is he literally doesn't pass the ball forward enough. He doesn't see a picture when the ball comes to him from the back or from the keeper. He never gets on the half turn and passes forward. He's very passes the way he's facing. So I would, if they had an offer, I would sell and reinvest. I think QPR are desperate for a box-to-box midfielder, a running midfielder. It's easier said than done to go and get them, but I think we're crying out for that sort of type. So if they could and reinvest it in that type of midfielder, I would do that.
I think the thing about Varane, I like some of what he does. One thing, we've said this before, so I'm repeating myself here. One of the things that sort of puzzled me was that I saw some criticism of Sam Field, and I know many will disagree with me on this, and I think, Kev, you do agree with me that I think Field in the centre of midfield is a better option than Varane, and I stand by that. I think he's a better all-round player. But one of the things that puzzled me was that the criticism of Field seemed to be that he wasn't cut out for a team that could play the ball out from the back and bring the ball out and play a passing style. But that is exactly Varane's weakness. That's the fundamental weakness that he has in his game. So why you would criticise Sam Field and have Jonathan Varane as your man, I'm not sure. I think he brings other attributes. James, are we being unfair?
No, I think you're being pretty fair, to be honest. I think Varane has a really good song, and that kind of adds to it a little bit, that the fans like singing his song and getting behind him in that way. But this season, it's definitely noticeable that there's a bit of a mentality shift where I think he just looks a little bit less confident on the ball and not as willing to take risks. And yeah, I completely agree with you, Kev. He's always looking to kind of go for the easier pass back towards the defence, or just making sure he doesn't lose possession. Thinking about selling him now, my only opposition to that is that perhaps his stock is a little bit lower than it could be, and maybe he could have a better second half to the season and his stock could rise a little bit by the summer. But I'm going to have to agree with you. If we do get a good offer, like similar to the one that we had in the summer, if we are spending big on the likes of Ronnie Edwards, then it kind of makes sense at the moment to cash in whilst we can.
I mean, talking of stock, I mean, it might not go up. I suppose that's the other risk.
The other thing I was going to say is also, I thought Hayden played really well on Sunday against West Ham, and he's an amazing person to deputise for him if he was to leave, and we probably would need to replace him, but we've just said how Ronnie Edwards can step into that position. So yeah, I think there are options in that area, which is good.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see how things do go this month. I mean, we were talking about, and I hadn't hoped to do a podcast earlier than this, and had we done so, I would have said going into January that I expected Frey and Sam Field out. I think that they're going to sell Sam. And I'm not sure now, in light of the injuries that are there and the injury to Varane himself, because he's also not fit at the moment, and the interest in him. So we'll see what happens there. Again, with Poku, when we talked about Poku, and another point there is that I also felt coming into January, coming into the window, that there was actually a fair chance they might sell Dembele. I know he's not been there very long, but he's a player who had a good reputation as a youngster. He's played abroad, and he's at that stage where he's still got a little bit of a reputation and is on the radar of clubs. And I felt like they might actually take their opportunity if it came up during this window, because he's not done particularly well so far, and they do have other options, and there has been some interest in him. I thought they might get rid of Dembele for a small profit on what they paid for him, rather than risk going further down the line where they might get into territory where he's worth less than they paid. But the injury to Poku now potentially changes that. So Field and Dembele were two players I thought might go, and now I that perhaps looks less likely. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and whether indeed they do go for that kind of box-to-box midfielder that Kev's been talking about. At the moment, it is that 4-4-2 that Julian Stefan likes, and he does like it, as we've seen, and I think wants to stick with it. Kevin, what are your thoughts on that, particularly against some teams who tend to be better in possession, and whether you think away from home that always works? Really, I wonder what your view on that was.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, Dave, and I spoke to you, and you said it to me, and at the start of the season, and you were 100% right. When Stefan came in July, I'd never thought that a Frenchman would come to QPR and play 4-4-2. I didn't see that happening. But he's obviously assessed the squad, and he feels that's the best way to get results. Yeah, I mean, I watched the game against Middlesbrough away, where we got completely overrun in midfield when they had a free, and I just think when we play against a team that's like good in possession and moves the ball quickly from the back to the middle into those middle thirds and are really comfortable in the team, I think we get outnumbered. And sometimes I feel like maybe away from home, a little bit different at home, because you can squeeze the pitch in because it's a bit tighter. But if you play on a big pitch and they're playing a free and there's big gaps and they're good on the ball and they can find that spare man in midfield, which against Middlesbrough happened a hell of a lot, especially in the first half. Then I just wonder why he doesn't sort of change it and just puts an extra man in midfield, like Morgan, or Field, or even Hayden with Maddison and Varane, and just go a little bit tighter, especially in the first hour of the game. It has surprised me that he hasn't done it. He looks very set in his ways, playing 4-4-2. So we'll see.
I do agree with you, Kev. I'm not a huge fan of the system. I've got to say, although I do think he plays it well. I mean, he doesn't play it in the kind of like two banks of four. Usually when someone says they want to play 4-4-2 to me, my reaction is, you think it's 1985. He doesn't play it in that way. But I mean, going back to what I said near the start, I would be playing with Kone rather than Burrell, and I would have been saying that for the past couple of months had we been doing more regular podcasts, guys, and Burrell would have made a mocker of me every time by scoring. But that's how I see it.
But do you think the centre forwards at the club are good enough to play that lone striker, or does the manager feel that he needs to always have a pair up there to get the best out of both?
Yeah, see, that's the thing, is that is exactly the thing, that he doesn't necessarily have that number 9 focal point. Although I do think that, again, Kone, for me, I know that Burrell's done very, very well. But I do think Kone, as he showed on Sunday when he didn't play particularly well, he can score. And I still believe he would have a lion's share of goals had he been playing in that role. Do they have two strikers capable of playing up there? I do think Kone could play it. But really, I think the onus is on the other players around them. And it's there really where they've been short, because had he had a kind of like full quota of attacking midfield players, Stefan, then you could look at, and wide players, you could then look at him and you could say, well, you could be doing this, you could be doing that, you could have so-and-so in the team. Often I think if you play two up front, or you go 4-4-2, you're taking out a quality central midfielder or number 10 or someone like that. Whereas he was a bit short in those options as well, Stefan. So I can see why he's done it, but I still would prefer that 3 across the middle and a Kone up top. Yeah. That's still the way. And I know. Go on, Kev. Sorry.
But Dave, remember at the start of the season, he said that Chair's going to play number 10.
Yeah.
So that
It's
would
not worked out.
that suggested to me that you're playing one up front with someone chairing behind as the number 10. But I don't think that's happened. Has that happened once? Maybe no, not that I remember. It might have, but it's usually his preferred selection, if everyone's fit, is Burrell and Kone, and Burrell as the sort of the last man running in behind, and Kone, which I don't think suits him coming deep.
No.
And I feel for him a little bit because he hasn't really got that sort of to run around. He hasn't really got that sort of mobility, and he does try, give him that. But I would rather see Kone up there as the number 9 focal point and standing there. And if we have to go a little bit long, come and hit me. I'll get hold of it, and then we all move up the pitch and make runs off me.
I think there is a positive aspect to this, though, Kev, which is that the change has been made partly because of those attacking options being limited by injuries, but also the positive aspect being that they've stumbled across the fact that they've got 2 players who can score. They've brought in Kone to score goals, and if you like, the lesser signing, as it seemed at the start of the season, has come in and done fantastically. So he's been in a position where he wants to find room for both of them, which is obviously a positive thing. I just think the thing with Burrell, I really like Burrell. I think Burrell has been a fantastic signing. Arguably, certainly their best signing in the summer for the money they paid. Great little player. Really, really like him. But I suppose I do prefer it with the one up front. I would prefer that one to be Kone. And when Burrell scores, it's great. But I look at that and I think, well, that's what you want a squad for. That's why you do invest a little bit in a squad. It should be that the guy who comes into the team, if a Kone isn't available or whatever, that he can score, that he can equip himself well. It shouldn't be that you're, bringing in players who are not up to it. If you're, I still believe Burrell would be, a backup striker for me. But your backup striker should be able to come in and do well in the Championship. He ought to look good at that level. If you've got 2 of them, if you've got a great backup, then fantastic. But I do agree with you, Kev. I think they'd be a lot more solid with a 3 in behind the 1, and I would have Kone as that one with a fantastic option where he's still fitting Burrell. But listen, can't knock Burrell, and like I said, every time he's gone on there, Burrell he's made a mockery of what I was saying because he's carried on scoring and got to double figures. James.
What I was going to say about Burrell is a reason why I can't see him being dropped is just because he seems to be the main person that leads the press and is the most effective person at pressing. He's kind of like the front of the spear. We seem to be playing this season in like a lower possession sort of strategy where we're not going to hold on to the ball for too long, but then attacking really quickly and then breaking quickly and managing to get a goal from that. So I feel like Burrell is just the key cog in that system. So if you were to switch out Kone, perhaps you'd have to sacrifice that style of play or that style of counter-attacking football. What do you both think about that, really?
Kev?
Watching what Burrell does gives you energy. And the main thing, what he's given the team this season is goals. But in his general play, he gives you energy. And what you're saying, he does. The ball goes over the top. And their centre-half looks like his favourite, and he puts them under pressure. And then their centre-half kicks it out for a throw-in. And then you're like 50 yards up the pitch and you can start playing. So Burrell gives us energy, goals, pressing. I agree, Dave, for the money. He was sort of under the radar signing, and he's to score 10 goals already this season. He's had a fantastic season, and it's just a shame he can't carry it on with his injury, but he's been fantastic.
He has. As I said, he's been great, and we'll never know what Kone would have done up front by himself for a prolonged spell. So,
but
it's
I always thought that,
Dave.
I always thought that Kone, when they played 4-4-2, I always thought that Kone would be like the number 9 and Burrell running off him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's the one coming deeper. And he's sort of the last man to run in behind and stretch the opposition.
It doesn't suit Kone, but I do think about Kone. See, the thing is, I think if you're QPR, and you're upstairs at QPR rather than down in the dugout, you're maybe looking at the situation and thinking, well, Kone really is the one who costs more money, and we would hope to, make more on him. He's the one that we've, you don't grumble if the other guy scores 10 goals, surely, sure, but you still look at that and think, well, there is a lot of emphasis on Kone and developing him. And I kind of agree with that, which is part of the reason why I perhaps would have gone with Kone. But what I also think about Kone, to his credit, is that even though he's playing in a role that isn't suited to him, he's kept at it. He's kept working hard. He's really worked in support of Burrell in that position. Burrell's done well, but he's done well partly because of the support he's been given by Kone at times, which has been first class. And I think if you're another club in a year or two looking at a Richard Kone who's maybe come into some form and scored some goals himself in the Championship, I also think you look at what happened when Kone wasn't playing in a role that suited him and maybe wasn't going for such a good time. And I think that maybe tells you something else about the player that you're potentially looking at, that when the chips were down a bit for him, he's not really sulked. He's kept going. He's done his best, but like you said, Kev, he's not really suited to that role at all. But you need to keep Burrell up there in that advanced role because, like James says, that's where he hassles defenders. That's where he presses from the front, and that's where he has so much of his success. So it's a tough one. It's a difficult problem. A nice one to have, I suppose, if you've got two strikers that are very different. But that's the.
But Kone's got the opportunity now to play number 9.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Again, grab your opportunity, grab your chance.
Starting at Stoke this weekend. Before we go, we'll give a prediction on that as we tend to. James is red hot on some of his predictions, so we'll see whether he's going to give us another Wrexham style one in a minute. Kev, we'll start with you.
Dave, he only done it once. He got lucky once.
That's more than I've done it.
Yeah.
So, what's your thought on what are your thoughts on this weekend again?
Every time I go positive, we lose, and every time I think we're going to get a draw or something, we win. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, which will then mean we win 2-0.
Yeah, I'm going to go for the 1-1 as well because it's a cop out, and I don't know enough about Stoke to say otherwise. So 1-1.
Well, that's true as well.
Handy one to go to. James, we'll end with you. Tell us the score and the lottery numbers, please.
I'm unfortunately going to be a bit more pessimistic. Just looking at their form, they're in good form. I think the fact that we're missing a few key players as well might mean that we're going to struggle a bit. They've just beaten Coventry 1-0 and in form Norwich before that, and then Hull before that. So I'm going to go for a cautious 2-1 to Stoke. That is, not to QPR.
Boo!
So I want to keep this record up.
Yeah, well, we'll see. All right, guys, thanks very much. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. And we'll hopefully be with you again next week. Cheers.